Hello, I wanted to stop in, give a quick video. The reason it's been a minute since any kind of upload recently is due to the fact that I had some ideas for multiple videos, and I just didn't feel like I could do them justice, and so I never got around to making them. The first one was Max Fowler recently in a grappling competition hit a submission off of an omoplata. The submission, there's multiple names for the submission, but the jiu-jitsu community, we call it like an Imanari choke. Imanari hit it back in around 2009 in a promotion called Deep, I believe. But the submission, we'll call it, is a Lobel lock or a yes lock from Daniel Bryan in the WWE. We'll call it the Lobel lock because that's the first name he gave it, because it came from the Gene Lobel lineage. So it's an omoplata with a face crank. Anyway, or a choke. Anyway, I was going to make a video on that and I didn't. And then another video popped up from Gold BJJ. I don't remember the guy's name, but he is I believe he's a 10th Planet Purple Belt, and he might have wrestled in school. But he competed in Josh Barnett's catch wrestling tournament out in California, and he won the heavyweight division. He made a video on how catch wrestling differs from jiu-jitsu and why he thinks that jiu-jitsu is more, I guess, friendly to newcomers. And a lot of it was just reiterating my points that I've made in a newer video, so I'm not going to do that right now. But I did think about basically kind of reacting to that video, and I still might react to that video at a later date. However, I came across this notion that catch wrestling is basically, this is the title of the video that we're having right now. Is catch wrestling just a sport? Or is it something more? Is catch wrestling just a sport? The thing I came across is that someone said that catch wrestling is more a sport than a martial art. And I think that is very short-sighted at the best. And that's it. That's me giving giving them the credit, or giving the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, catch wrestling is a sport, but is it just a sport? And I will say no. And the analogy that I'll give is that if I enter into a karate competition tomorrow, technically I am competing in karate. That does not mean that I am trained in karate. Same goes for judo. I could enter into a judo competition. Maybe I even win in a hypothetical world, dreamland. Maybe I win a judo competition. That doesn't mean that I'm trained in judo, the martial art. I just competed in judo, the sport. The same goes for catch wrestling, okay? Catch wrestling is a sport. And it did develop techniques to compete in that sport. Just the same as judo has developed techniques to compete in judo with the new rules changes. That doesn't mean that judo is not a martial art anymore. That doesn't mean that I become a martial artist and my martial art is judo if I compete in judo. That just means that I competed in the sport of judo. The same can be said of catch wrestling. Catch wrestling is a sport, and it is developed itself over time to adapt to the rule set that it finds itself in. Just like nowadays, you see a lot of catch wrestlers that have adapted to the no-pin scenario to compete in mixed martial arts and in no-pin grappling. But that doesn't mean that it's only a martial art either. It's a sport and a martial art. Years ago, and I would say this is probably 12 years ago at this point, I had a discussion on Facebook about this specific topic, and people were saying that catch wrestlers are only catch wrestlers if they compete in catch wrestling competition. to that, I don't know. I'm not going to say that catch wrestlers shouldn't compete, because they should. You should go sign up and go compete. You should go to Wrestling Wars up in the Chicago area that Tom Headhunter Higgins is running, and you should go compete in catch wrestling. You should go to compete under Josh Barnett's rule set and go compete in catch wrestling. You should go to travel in England to go travel and compete at the Snake Pit Wigan. You should go compete in catch wrestling. However, if you're a jiu-jitsu guy and you compete in catch wrestling, that doesn't mean your martial art is automatically catch wrestling. If I trained under Billy Robinson my entire career, then that's the only thing I trained in, but then I enter into a mixed martial arts competition, my martial art, my style, would be catch wrestling. Now, and I'm just beating a dead horse, and I know that everybody, if you watch my channel, you already agree with me anyway. However, I lost my point because I'm so angry about this. You can train other styles, right? Folk style, and you're learning a version of wrestling that you can compete in catch wrestling with. And we're not going to get into the nuances of how American folk style first came about. We're not going to get into the nuances of how international freestyle first came about in the Olympics. Okay, maybe we will at a different video, but I would say probably 90% of you already know that answer. Okay, that doesn't mean that it's the full real deal. It means that that's folk style and that's freestyle. For catch wrestling has its own style to compete in catch wrestling competition, but also catch wrestling can compete in no holds barred competition, and it did for years back in the early 1900s. Now, my earlier point that I forgot is that Billy Robinson, to my knowledge, he didn't use the term martial art. He did say, I believe he said grappling sport, or maybe combat, or martial sport, or combat sport. He did say sport. However, the way he used it is in the way that you would talk about judo, and he said that catch wrestling was the greatest of the grappling sports. Which you could construe that however you want, but in my opinion, if you look at it, he was using it in a way that was talking about mixed martial arts competition or mixed grappling competition, where it's not necessarily always going to be the pin. Now, when we trained with Billy, when he was touring at the end of his life, he would often talk about how he wished there was a rule set for catch wrestling in the modern day and age, because there's so many things that so many submissions that you can get off of someone avoiding the pin, and he really liked the pin. You can get different submissions when they're trying to get off their back. You can get different submissions, or you can get cool little pretty pinning combinations. Okay, so but the version of catch wrestling that he taught was for no pin submission grappling, and it was for mixed martial arts competition. Now, I would dare anybody to tell Billy Robinson that he wasn't teaching catch wrestling just because he wasn't teaching for the sport of catch wrestling. Okay, he was teaching the style of catch wrestling, which is interchangeable with the term martial art of catch wrestling. And one last point on this is Billy would often talk, and you can see this in some of his videos. If you ever watch Billy Robinson teach a standing double wrist lock, there's videos on YouTube. He would often show strikes, palm strikes to the face, elbows to the back of the head. He would talk often about how good catch wrestlers could flatten a guy out with a body lock on their back, like you would see in MMA, and take your elbow and elbow the back of the head and just finish the match. And he would often talk about how everyone is afraid of Muay Thai elbows, but a catch wrestler's elbows were something to be really afraid of, because they would elbow you in the back of the head while you're stuck underneath. So that's my opinion on that. Is catch wrestling a sport or just a sport? It's not just a sport. It is a sport, but it's not just a sport. It's a martial art. And I believe you all agree with me on this. Anyway, that's my thought on all this. To real quick, I mentioned it, but there's Wrestling Wars 9, I believe, coming up in the Chicago area. You'll probably see some, I don't know, I looked it up. You might see some sumo, you might see some Irish collar and elbow, tag team wrestling, you'll see some catch wrestling, singles and tag team. who knows what else? Maybe some Cornish wrestling, you know? If I mention Cornish wrestling, maybe Tom Higgins will start doing some Cornish wrestling up at Wrestling Wars. I'm not sure when the next grappling competition out west, or catch wrestling competition, is out west with Barnett. Anyway, thanks for listening to this rant. Catch wrestling is, to reiterate, Billy Robinson. Catch wrestling is the greatest combat sport in the world. Thank you, guys.